So what if our cities weren't just, concrete and steel? What if they were actually alive, like growing, adapting, even healing themselves and the planet? It sounds a little out there, I know, but today we're going to dive into exactly that. We're exploring mycopunk, a really radical vision for how we might live in the future.
And really, the whole thing kicks off with this simple but super powerful idea. Think about it. The places we live in, our homes, our cities, they're not just boxes we exist inside of. No, they actively shape everything. They shape our social circles, our economies, and yeah, even the stories we tell ourselves about who we are as people.
So here's how it frames the problem we're in. Right now, we live in a world that's all about vertical thinking. You know what I mean? Career ladders, corporate hierarchies, social classes, it's all about climbing up. But these systems, while they promise a view from the top, often just leave us feeling isolated. Mycopunk flips that on its head. It's all about horizontal thinking, and it's modeled on, of all things, mycelium, the root network of fungi. Instead of climbing up, it spreads out. It connects everything, and the whole network only thrives when every part of it thrives. So what is mycopunk, really? Let's get to the core of it. It's basically a framework, an idea, that mashes up the incredible logic of how fungi work with some really fresh ideas about community. And then it mixes in a kind of architecture that doesn't just, not harm the planet. It actually actively regenerates it.
And this is so crucial to get. Mycopunk isn't just about cool new buildings. It's way bigger than that. It's a whole new philosophy for how civilization could work. It's about shifting our perspective away from seeing the world as just a bunch of separate, competing things, me versus you, us versus them, and instead seeing it as one giant, interconnected living system. Kind of like a forest, right?
Okay, so we've got the big idea, the philosophy. But what does a world like this actually look like? What's it made of? How do you even build it? Let's get into the nitty-gritty and see how this whole thing comes to life. All right, the core design principle here is something called mycomimetic architecture. And listen, this is way more than just biomimicry. We're not talking about just building houses that look like mushrooms. That's not it. We're talking about designing entire systems that behave like a mycelial network. Systems that share resources, adapt on the fly, and grow organically. Not because some boss tells them to, but through a kind of distributed intelligence.
So how do you actually build with this stuff? Well, it starts with this pretty revolutionary material. Get this, you take agricultural waste, things like corn stalks, and you mix it with textile waste, from the fast fashion industry. Then you add mycelium, which acts like a natural living glue, just binding it all together. You let it grow for a couple of weeks, then you compress it, dry it out, and infuse it with sodium silicate to make it super strong, fire-resistant, and waterproof. I mean, you're literally growing your building blocks out of trash. How cool is that?
And with that material, you can build these incredible things called framework communities. Just picture it, scaffolding-based neighborhoods that climb right up the sides of old buildings. They're all modular, so you can reconfigure them whenever you need to, say if your family grows. They have these amazing integrated food forests and shared workshops, and they create this wonderful third space. It's not quite your private home, but it's not totally public either. It's a space that just naturally fosters a new kind of community.
And look, this isn't just some sci-fi fantasy. In this vision of the future, you have researchers like a Dr. Amara Okafor, who started studying these communities. And at first, her advisors were like, no way. They were super skeptical, telling her the data was just too good to be true. But, well, the numbers don't lie.
So what did she find? Well, for starters, this one number is just mind-blowing. On a boiling hot July day, the temperature inside these framework communities was a full 17 degrees Celsius cooler than the concrete jungle right next door. Let that sink in. This living architecture was literally reversing the urban heat island effect, that awful thing that makes our cities dangerously hot every single summer.
And the benefits? They just kept stacking up. Stormwater runoff, a huge cause of flash floods in cities, was cut by 60%. The nasty air pollution, that particulate matter that gives people asthma, down by 34%. And get this, wildlife started coming back. For the first time in decades, you had cardinals nesting in the city, and butterfly migration routes were actually reappearing right through these communities.
Dr. Okafor really hit the nail on the head. She said, this isn't just sustainable development. Sustainability is about doing less harm. No, this is regenerative development. It means these communities are actively healing the ecosystem, all while taking care of their own needs.
But here's what truly blew the researchers' minds. Every single one of those environmental wins came with a social win. The vertical gardens? That's food security. The local microgrids? Energy independence. The way everything was connected, that created this incredible community resilience. It turns out you didn't have to choose between helping the planet and helping people. You could do both.
Okay, so the buildings are alive, the environment is healing. That's amazing, but what does that do to us? How does living in a world like this fundamentally change society itself?
Let's explore that, because the ripple effects here go deep. I mean, they transform everything from the jobs we have to the very way we think. This is the real shift to a regenerative society. First off, the whole world of work gets turned upside down. You start seeing all these new jobs that just didn't exist before. Jobs that are all about care and cultivation. You have symbiosis coordinators, whose job it is to manage the relationships between all the living systems. And then you have mycelium engineers, people who literally garden the architecture, guiding how it grows. And it's not just jobs, our social structures change too. The way we resolve conflict, for instance, shifts from this adversarial win-lose negotiation to something called myco-mediation. Think of it this way. Instead of two people fighting over one thing, they work together to find a solution that helps the whole community. It's just like how a fungal network sends nutrients to where they're needed most. The whole logic of society moves from mine to ours, from individual ownership to collective stewardship. The impact on mental health is just profound. Studies found that rates of anxiety and depression in these communities were roughly half of what you'd see in a typical city. I mean, in an age where loneliness and stress are just through the roof, it seems like living in contact with things that are growing, changing, and responding to you, well, it fulfills some deep human need we've forgotten about.
The economy, it goes through a total seismic shift. It stops being about extraction, about taking, and becomes about cultivation and care. Things like resource sharing and gift economies become the norm. You even see these cool urban-rural labor exchanges, where people from the city go spend time working on farms, totally reweaving the fabric of how we think about work and value.
But maybe the deepest change of all happens on another level. As one thinker from this world put it, mythology is how we digest facts into meaning, right? When your reality changes that much, you need new stories. You need new ways to make sense of it all.
And so, new stories, new myths start to pop up. People start saying things like, the scaffolds grew from spores in human dreams, or the buildings were always alive, we just finally gave them permission to show it. My personal favorite is this one. We were decomposing civilization to create nutrients for what came next. That's how a culture adapts, right? It creates new meaning, a new kind of magic out of its new reality.
So, when you pull it all together, the living buildings, the regenerative society, these new myths, you realize what we're talking about here. This isn't just a new way to build a city, it's a whole new way to be.
Which kind of brings us to one last thought to leave you with.
The real question mycopunk is asking all of us is this. What if our civilization stopped acting like an invading army, just conquering and taking? What if instead it learned to grow like a forest? Interconnected, resilient, adaptive, and always regenerating. Just think, what kind of world could we build then?